Welcome back to Narrowing the Divide. Today, today I'm pleased to be joined by, oh my goodness, by Joe Pomeroy. Joe and I have been friends now for a couple years. Joe is a podcaster. He's also a coach. We connected because I was part of the $1 Million Mastermind with Ray Edwards. And as part of, or as a member of that mastermind experience and some of the copywriting training that was taking place, I was pleased to be introduced to Joe as my coach through some of those experiences. And we have maintained a relationship for, it's been about 3 or 4 years now. Joe, welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Dan. I'm excited to be having this conversation with you.
Me too. And I'll just share, I got hung up at the introduction here because right as the countdown timer was going off, Joe said, I'd appreciate some freestyle rap from you too.
I think all the listeners would, actually. I think we all would.
I don't know, Joe. I don't know that anyone would appreciate hearing that from me.
We'll do that as an independent episode. I apologize for putting you on the spot with that. You can create your own individual episode of freestyle rap, and we'll see how that does in downloads.
I guess I'd have to figure out how to freestyle rap first. There is that as a challenge. Speaking of challenges, you're on the Narrowing the Divide podcast, and that's one of the things I really like to dig into. You have actually helped me quite a bit with honing in more and more on this podcast into where I want to go. We had a conversation just the other day that helped me to see, and this isn't about me, but I'll take a minute to help me to see exactly where I'm inspired to be with regards to the content I'm creating. And, narrowing the divide, it wasn't just a random name I came up with. There is more to it that I keep uncovering. Seems like almost weekly, but I've tuned into the space of, what do we call it? It's the ugly pieces that people tend to fast forward over, were your words. And, from a major event or a turning point in someone's life into what they're doing now, they don't spend much time talking about what that space looked like and what the actual next steps were. So I hope we can get to some of that with you today, Joe. Well, I'd love for listeners to first hear more about the kind of coaching you do, because really you're helping from a holistic perspective to bring families together, families of those people who are also self-employed or entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many, I think so much in the entrepreneurial world, we get focused on the business that we're trying to build. And so many people that become entrepreneurs, that are married, that have kids, they want to do it for their family. I'm doing this for my family because I want freedom and flexibility of finances, of time. And so it's all about family for them. And yet the family ends up sitting on the wayside while they try to build this thing. And I think that I've discovered that that's out of order. It's out of order based on principles that I believe in and that I've come to discover. It's out of order based on my own experiences that I went through and almost losing my marriage and damaging my family. And it's just out of order, because what's the point in building this flexible multi-million-dollar enterprise from the ground up, and look what I've done, and it's amazing, and I've built this, and all these people that I get to support and help, and yet I go home and they're strangers.
Or I that's so wonderful. My or is going to be, because you just made me reflect on quite a bit. I've worked with 48 days in like the career coaching space, among other things. And I think to something that's come across my desk a number of times. Actually, I have two thoughts. So first one is, in any career, we can easily fall into the trap of achieving the next level of success. And what my thought was that then we turn around and we're, 40, 50 years old. we look around and there's no one left to cheer for us when we finally feel like we've made it. And it's because of the sacrifices that we choose to make. I did that in the military, Joe. I spent, here we go. You ready? So in the military, I realized in my divorce in 2017 that part of my contribution to that relationship was focusing on the wrong things. I focused on the mission that I was taught to put first, of course. That's the sort of the mentality and the approach. Mission first, we're family oriented, but only when you have time type of thing. And I believed in that mission. And so I put it to the forefront. And then when I turned around, there was nothing there. So I get that. I had the other thought. I lost it, so I might come back to it. But I think there's so much value in the work you're doing. Oh, the other thought was I had a coaching conversation just yesterday with a young lady. And that's one of the things that we together realized in her world is she was, burning herself out in work focus and sacrificing health, which also impacted her family. And so we helped shift some of that in our conversation. And it was just a delight to see those aha moments. So I love the work you're doing. I think it's much needed in all kinds of space, male, female, doesn't matter. It's if you're not focusing on family first and building that, then I don't think you can be nearly as successful or reach your maximum potential in business. Thoughts?
Yeah. And, you talked about the cheering you on part. And I think one of the loneliest, difficult things that someone can do is try to build a business. I don't think, people talk about being a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and you can get very isolated, especially if you're doing something in the online space. It's really easy. It's been really easy for me to spend an entire week just sitting in my office at my computer and not having any conversations with anybody. I mean, that was the norm when I first got started. And I think that's true for a lot of entrepreneurs. I think that's why you see so many people wanting to jump on webinars or join communities or masterminds or group coaching or things to have that connection. And that's a good thing. I don't think that's bad. I think that can be very positive and very healthy. Dan, I know you've got your mastermind that you're building and developing and the people that you get to serve with that. Yes. And that's really useful and really powerful. The problem is that if I am so isolated that I'm reaching out to make connections in all these different groups, then I'm focusing my time on those connections during business hours rather than building my business. And so it can actually become a distraction if not utilized properly. You get a whole bunch of cooks in the kitchen. You and I have had a conversation about that. It was something that I was struggling with recently, and too many cooks in the kitchen, and that's difficult. So what if, one more thought on that actually before I go into my what if. I would imagine that there's many entrepreneurs, many business builders who have felt torn between this idea of they're supposed to be focusing on work, and yet they feel guilty that they're missing out on XYZ with their kids, or that they ended up breaking ABC promise to their spouse. And so there's this I'm doing this for my family, but I'm not spending any time with my family. I don't think anybody's fully oblivious to the idea that they're not pouring into their families, that they're not developing that they're not helping with that. And so here I am supposed to be building my business, and yet I feel distracted by not having this cheering section or this depth of relationship with my family, and it creates difficulty. And so what happens then if on the reverse, I'm going to be just as intentional with my family and those relationships, and that's where I'm getting my connection. And so then I don't need to go spend all of my business time on courses and communities and bouncing between Facebook groups and, $100,000 masterminds or whatever. I don't need to do all of that. I can be very selective. I can choose the right coach, the right community, have that singular element that actually supports and boosts my business because I get other needs met with my relationships at home. And then when I have a bad day, I can go and communicate with my wife. I can go play with my kids. They're excited to see me. It's not like this, oh, Dad's here. We haven't, he's back from this week-long thing that we haven't seen him. Oh, but he's only been upstairs in his office. Like there's none of that. And so it creates a totally different mental and emotional dynamic when you prioritize and become intentional with your family first.
I love so much about what you've said. And I just want to add a couple points that I've observed and partially observed in myself. I have a tendency, and this is still left over from my time in the military, is I have this immediacy associated with responding to inquiries from people, responding to requests on social media or other things. And I just want to say, because I'm practicing this, is it's okay to allow that to sit while you focus on the things that are important. Yes, your business is important. But I think all in all, we're saying here that, if it's at the sacrifice of what means the most to you in your personal relationships, then think about that before you decide that something needs to be addressed right now. In fact, we have another mutual friend who's a coach, Cliff Ravenscraft. I just had him on the podcast. It was published a couple of weeks ago, I think, by the time this comes out. And he didn't talk about this, but I've heard him say that there was a point in his career where he had that same immediacy. And then he realized, well, why? Why am I doing that? I can submit a help request. It's not something that I can directly impact right now. Anyway, there was a challenge with something technical. It might have been podcast related, but it was impacting his ability to complete a task. And I can, instead of submitting a help ticket and then waiting around on fire to ensure I'm there the moment this gets resolved, I can submit my help ticket, still go to dinner and enjoy company with my wife. And I'm probably not doing this story enough justice, but still go to dinner with my wife, come back and see what the status is. I don't have to be there with any kind of immediate need to check on it consistently. They're going to do their part. They're going to come back. Everything's going to be okay. It's just not right this second. I think that's a great reminder. It is for me. So I thought that I'd add that, Joe.
I like that. I want to jump in on two things with that. One is the irony of something you said. And then I want to share a story of how I actually overcame that issue myself. So the irony in the story is that family's important, work's important. Like, I love that you said, hey, it's not that your business is not important. Your business is important, especially if someone's doing a purpose-driven business where they really feel called to do something. I don't even know if I want to say especially on that, because I don't care what you're doing. If you're trying to build a business that serves other people, it's important. But you really clarified something where you said what's most important. And there's only the priorities isn't a word. It's something that we made up. It's something that's been added to the dictionary because it got used enough, like for shizzle or something like that. Like, never in human history was for shizzle a word, but you can go find it in the dictionary now because it's been used enough. It's the same with priorities. By definition, you can only have one priority. And so, and I think even with that, there's seasons for things that determine whether it's the most important or important. During the day, my family is always most important in terms of how I'm going to prioritize my life and who I'm going to put first. And during the day when I'm doing business, hey, I'm not just going to sit around and we're homeschooling our kids. I'm not just going to sit there with my kids and stare at them and be holding my wife's hand while she's trying to teach the kids and be like, you guys are most important. I can't go anywhere else or do anything else. Like, that's not what this is. But it's say, okay, this is a time where I'm going to focus on my business so that I can go full on with my family later today and be present and stuff. So it's just, I think one of the ironies when we're trying to say everything is important. Yeah, everything is important, but what's most important? And what are you doing to intentionally prioritize that while still meeting your other needs? And here's how I overcame a quick story on how I overcame the immediate need to like respond. It really is a Pavlov's dog. I mean, you can go find any number of studies they've done and any number of stories about the ding that goes off on your phone and the notifications and how social platforms like specifically adjust when things go out to create the greatest, frankly, the greatest addiction. I was going to say for lack of a better word, but I actually think that's the most appropriate word.
I think you're probably right.
So what I did is I found my wife and I are driving our kids in our minivan, and I love minivans. So I'm a proud minivan owner. It's just so practical, but I digress. So we'd be driving in our minivan with our kids, and it's like a text message would pop up or something. And it doesn't matter all the studies about the danger of texting and driving. It doesn't matter, like, because everyone's convinced it won't happen to them. I won't even say we. I won't even bring my wife into this. I was convinced I could both steer the car, check my phone. I'd look up and down fast enough where I'd be okay. And I was so aware of my surroundings, everything would be fine. And then I just decided one day, and I think it was partially because it's easier to see those things in someone else. And I was frustrated that my wife was doing it. And I thought, well, that's awfully hypocritical. Like, I'm doing it. And it's like, oh, but no, Dan, you don't understand. It's okay for me to do it because I won't have anything happen, but she shouldn't do it. Right? That's it. That doesn't work. So I decided, I just told my kids one day when I was taking them to school, before we were homeschooling, I said, hey, kids, if you see me touch my phone, unless I'm stopped at a red light, if you see me touch my phone, you can just immediately start going, precious cargo, precious cargo, precious cargo. Okay. And you do that until I put my phone down. And then we started doing that. And then I had to clarify that they needed to do it in a nice tone instead of because there's like precious cargo, Dad. And I was like, that doesn't work, guys. It's got to be a nice tone. But it was pretty instant where I would put down my phone, and it took maybe 2 to 3 weeks for the impulse to go away. Even though like I'd hear something and it'd be like this chemical reaction or something in my body that I wanted to grab it and check it. But I knew if I did, my kids would start going, precious cargo, precious cargo. And it took about 3 weeks before like, I don't even care. Like, doesn't even matter. And now that's translated to how I function in business, how I function when I'm not in the car. When I'm at home, if I'm going to go be with my kids, my phone's oftentimes in a different room. Not always. And if I hear it go off or I hear a text message, like my wife or my kids, they'll be like, oh, what's that? Who's that? And I'm like, doesn't matter. All right, here with you guys. We're good. And it all came from this one little precious cargo thing.
I said I wasn't going to do that, but it seemed appropriate.
I liked it.
I love that. That's what a great testament to how you came or overcame that. And what a great reminder, because I do believe it only takes a split second, right? We think we can look down and back up and we're aware enough of our surroundings, but I see it every day and it's a shame. So I love that you shared a practical how-to, and I hope that someone can take that away, if nothing else, from this conversation. I'm taking away that this has already been a lot of fun, but no, there's no but. I want to dig in a little bit. I do want to shift gears slightly. I want to talk more. You mentioned a couple things early on, and I'm just going to ask the question, what led you down this path of coaching? Because you said that, you almost failed in your marriage. I don't know if that's exactly how you phrased it, but then you also said that you mentioned people who are called to their work. And I'm curious which one that is for you. Now, Before you answer that, Joe, I do want to hit one other thing. You brought up some really good points about priorities, and this just came to mind. I'm not an affiliate for this at all, but I do love Michael Hyatt's Full Focus Planner. What I really love about that, and it aligns with what you said, is it allows you to establish your big three for the day, for your week, and ideally those things align with your annual goals. And so each quarter you kind of go through this process of aligning those. And then at the start of the week, you align those. And then the start of each day, you have the opportunity to align those. And it's really easy for people to get caught up on, here's my big goals for work. But it's really simple to say, my big three for the day are finding a way to spend time with what's most important to me or my family or a relationship or whatever that may be, building connections, and doing something for my work. So that said, let's go back to you, Joe, and where you are with, not where you are, but how you got into the world of coaching and focusing on these family relationships.
Yeah. Well, I had one little argument with my wife that lasted about 13 seconds. And I realized, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. And the rest of my marriage has been perfection. I thought I need to teach people how to be perfect like me. So that's really what led to this. No, not at all, obviously. No, it actually, so I've always enjoyed dreaming and imagining and wondering what's possible. And then I kind of got introduced to the entrepreneurial mindset, probably my early 20s. And I was going to school and I was studying business, and man, I loved business. I thought about doing psychology, but I got involved in marketing because I wanted to do something with business. And marketing is basically psychology. You're using human psychology in order to be able to promote and develop whatever product or business. So that was fascinating, and all of it made sense. And I had a supply chain teacher. He was phenomenal in the way he laid things out. And I was like, oh yeah, A to B and B to C and C to D. And it all makes sense. Everything makes sense. Everything's figure outable. Like Marie Forleo says or whatever. So, and then I got married and I thought, hey, piece of cake. Like, I know how to communicate. I'm a great communicator, like consistently being complimented on it. And around the time that I got married, I had was only about maybe 7 or 8 months into helping to build a business from the ground up. And that business was able to build into an 8-figure juggernaut. And we were doing in a single month what most companies do in that industry in 1 to 3 years.
Wow.
And we were doing every single month. And so I'd helped with that. And while I was helping with that, I'm figuring out this marriage thing. And I was earning my master's degree in strategic development. And I enrolled in an entrepreneurial contest, an international contest, and got in the top 3 on that, and won that competition, and just all these different things going on. And I'm feeling really good, right? I'm getting all this outside praise. Oh, Joe, you won this, you won this competition. That's awesome. Oh, Joe, hey, business is building, and employees love me and clients love me. And I'm the go-to problem solver. Like, hey, if someone comes in angry and frustrated, send them to Joe, because Joe can turn them in from, take them from being frustrated on the call to being a raving fan by the end of it. And yet I'm having challenges at home. Well, it's obvious, Dan, that if all these outside things are going well, and yet there's a problem at home, it was clearly my wife. Okay. Because I do great everywhere else. So clearly she's the problem. And
was that actually your perspective in the moment?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Super arrogant. I've never really considered myself an arrogant individual,
sure, but
I was absolutely arrogant in that. Absolutely. And my wife and I, for as introverted as I can be, where I'm totally good just sitting to myself, listening to an audiobook, the whole week, even before I was married, and I don't have to go out and do stuff, to as extroverted as my wife can be. as far as communication goes, like hers just comes natural, like when she feels comfortable and she talks, but she's not going to get on the debate stage with anybody. She's not going to get in any, like, that's just not her. She doesn't want to have those conversations. Whereas me, I'm like, bring it, let's go. And so that, because she didn't want to have those conversations where I was like, hey, this isn't working. This element's not working. Let's talk about it. And she's just like, what do you want me to say? Kind of thing. That just supported my evidence that I'm this great communicator. And she was clearly the problem. Well, that kind of arrogance doesn't serve a marriage well. Doesn't serve love well. It doesn't serve service well. And the truth of the matter is that I had some skeletons in my closet that I believed once she knew of those challenges from my past and even some things in my present, that she's going to leave me anyway. So I was I had 1 foot out just in case. And one night, everything came. We were arguing about something that was so important. I'm not exactly sure what it was.
Important to whom?
Yeah. Ironic. Well, I was being ironic, Dan.
Okay.
It was quote unquote so important that right now I don't remember exactly what it was. It had something to do with she wanted to do something and I didn't want to do that thing. And but she said so-and-so said we should do it. I don't even remember what it was. And yet at the moment, it felt so important that we just got in this big old argument. And it wasn't our first. But this argument, I got so frustrated that I turned around and we were in our upstairs hallway and we had some cupboards that lined one of the walls of the hallway. And I was barefooted and I just threw this, to my embarrassment, I threw this man-sized fit and kicked in the cupboard door with my bare foot. And I'm just holding on to the top and I'm just kicking it with my bare foot. And my wife walks behind me and heads downstairs. And I can't really hear anything until I'm done throwing my tantrum and the cupboard door is destroyed. And it's hanging by one screw left on the top. Like there's like this L shape and the rest of it's just obliterated all over the upstairs hallway. And as I stop and start to catch my breath, I hear her grabbing her keys. She's leaving. She's headed for the door. And the other thing that happened is as the adrenaline faded away, I felt this throbbing pain pulse up from my heel. And I looked down and I've got a chopstick-sized piece of wood sticking out of my foot.
Wow.
And I kind of hobble over and I'm trying to pull it out, but I can't quite get it. And I'm not fully focused because I'm still flustered and she's headed. And I'm like, she's leaving. Like, I didn't really want her to leave. I didn't really think, I was just saying things because I was angry. Right. And I sit down at the top of the stairs and I've got blood dripping down onto our carpet and she's opening the door and I know I have to say something, but I don't know what to say. Dan, I think most of the time as entrepreneurs, we talked earlier in our conversation about priorities, what's important, what's most important.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time we have an idea of what we think is most important, but we haven't really sat down and committed to what's most important. We haven't really taken the time to develop this vision of our future, what we actually want, what fits into it, and why things are or are not as important as others. And in this moment, as I'm sitting there, it was like everything slowed way down. And just in my mind, I'm just all these images of experiences we'd already had together, laughing and smiling and joking, and experiences I wanted to have, places that I've been, like New Zealand or other places that I wanted to be able to share with her and show her, and all these different things. And I realized what I wanted was a happy, healthy marriage. And I wanted her, not just a marriage, I wanted her. And I needed to say something. And me as the great communicator was going to come up with something fabulous. No, I didn't. I just opened my mouth and it came out sloppy and ugly. And wait, please, wait, don't go. I need help. And then she just stood there for a minute at the door. The door's partway open. She's just standing there. And I don't know what she's going to do. It's in these moments that I think we really have the opportunity to decide what's truly most important, what's truly most valuable. In these potential moments of loss, we talk about people run away from pain and they move towards pleasure. Pain is always the more powerful driver. And it wasn't until I faced this moment of losing it that I really understood how much I wanted it. And to my wife's credit, she closed the door and she turned around and she came upstairs, pulled the chopstick out of my foot, and we just kind of sat there because now what? And I didn't know what to do at that point, but I knew I was committed to figuring it out. And then there's the part I fast forward for. So that's my catalyst story, right? If we're going and we're talking about narrowing the divide, Dan, that's my catalyst story.
Yeah.
The thing that really turned everything around. Then I fast forward and now I'm this awesome, amazing coach.
That's great, Joe. You want to what we're doing today? No, we're not going to do that. I'm going to challenge you here because first of all, there's a lot to be said about that story. And I know that we could go so many places just from what you've shared there. There were, I imagine, so many different, well, you've already shared different moments in that particular instance that occurred and that were a catalyst. So I want to commend you, first of all, for recognizing in that moment what it was you really, truly wanted to commit to with regards to your marriage and the need to open your mouth and say something. And I love that. I recognize in some of that story different moments in my life, and what stands out really is Tony Robbins training, the how to create lasting change. It's a 10-day training. Again, not an affiliate, just sharing an experience. But I believe in there he's teaches about the need to face it. If we want to create change, there has to be an immediate pain associated with the thing we want to change. And then we have to identify what it's going to take to turn that into immediate pleasure as a replacement. So, and there's a lot more that goes into that. I'm not qualified to teach that in the moment, but working on it. Anyway, I love that you pointed that piece out. I think it's so important. So now you're in this place of these are the things that the marriage at the moment is what you wanted to commit to changing. And then what was next?
Well, I didn't have any clue where to begin. And, I think my Christian upbringing had, because we'd been married for several years at this point. And, Dan, if I just prayed harder, if I just read my scriptures more, if I just had more faith. And I believe that for me, God is the ultimate healer. For me, true healing comes through God. And yet I was bringing so much baggage and so much preconceived notions into my relationship with God and how I viewed who I was in him that I wasn't actually able to do that in my marriage. And I also, if you break your arm, do I believe that someone in the name of God could heal your arm instantly? Yes, I believe that. But I also believe God has inspired modern medicine and doctors and a pathway that we can go and receive healing, and the body in itself is miraculous. And so I don't think to embrace one, you have to abandon the other.
That's right.
And so at this moment, I needed more than just prayer. I needed more than just this instant miraculous healing. I had wounds that I'd created in our relationship that needed to be healed. I had wounds from my past that needed to be healed. I didn't know these terms at the time, Dan. I wouldn't have been able to tell you what it was at that time. And so what I did is I reached out to someone I trusted who had had similar experiences. It was a very good friend of mine. His name's Colby Giles, and one of the most important friends I've had in my entire life. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, this happened. This is where I'm at. I have no idea what I'm doing. And thankfully, he had the wisdom to offer from his own experience. And I'm intentionally phrasing it like this because I'm willing to bet that as most people are listening to this, that there is someone they know that they have felt impressed to turn to, someone that they know that they may end up feeling impressed to turn to. People in listening to this conversation may feel impressed to reach out to you, Dan, or further engage with you, or reach out to me and further engage with me. But there's these impressions that come that can be supports in our lives. And so I'm phrasing it the way I am intentionally. And there's also impressions that will come for us to give support and give help. And that comes up later for me in my story of why I became a coach and things like that. So I reached out to this friend. He said, hey, I started doing this program. And I think it would be really good, really, really helpful for you and your wife. It's something that you start out as couples, and then you kind of do some individual work. And I said, oh, okay, give me the info. And he gave me the info, and I looked it up, and I was like, that's expensive. Right? Here I am, my wife's headed out the door. I have no idea how to be married. I've already invested so much. You know how expensive, how expensive divorce can be, Dan, not just paying for the divorce, but the divide of things. And that's only the temporal financial aspects of it, let alone the mental, emotional. And I think it was like $600. $600 a person. So I think it was like $1,200. And I was like, oh, I don't know. That's a lot of money. And he's like, well, what's it worth to you? What's it worth to you to obtain what you truly actually want? What's it worth to you to know that you've given everything you could possibly give to figure this out? And I went, oh, more than $1,200. Okay, it's your call, man. Just letting you know. And I did, and we got signed up for that. And this is all part of the story I normally don't tell. So the program was actually an addiction recovery program. I had been hiding an addiction from my wife, or claiming it wasn't an addiction and that I was fine, whatever.
Sure.
And so we were going to this program. We signed up for this thing that was too expensive, but then really was a drop in the bucket compared to what I was willing to give for my marriage and my family. And Dan, I was terrified I would know somebody when I walked into this room. And I was like, I really hope I don't know anybody, because I don't want to have to acknowledge to anybody in my normal world that I'm in an addiction recovery program. And so I'm just walking in. I'm trying not to make eye contact with anybody. I'm hoping, angle my head a certain way. And if there is somebody, I won't know them, whatever. And there's probably about 15 couples in the room, 12 to 15 couples in the room. And immediately I knew one of the couples, and they went to my church. And I was like, oh, shoot. What does this mean for everybody in the church? And then I knew another couple. They were a friend of mine's parents. And I was like, and at first I was so focused on me. And then I thought, I bet they're thinking and feeling the same things. And I ultimately decided I am here for me. It does not matter what anybody else says or what anybody else thinks. I am here for me, so that I can receive healing, and for my wife, so that our family can receive healing. And once I made that focus, it became easier. It became simpler. It was still hard, but that's how that journey began. Was in that program, a group version, and then individual sessions, marriage counseling, group coaching that followed that. For about 3 years. And as I'm going through this program, there are a lot of really successful people in there. I tell you, Dan, I don't know why there were a lot of dentists in there. Um, but there were lots of business owners, actually. I think in the group element, there was about 10 men, 10, yeah, about 10 men that were in this group element. And about 7 or 8 of them were business owners or building businesses. And which I think that goes to say something. And one day I was really irritated because this guy was complaining about the same thing that he complained the week before, and he wasn't getting it. And it seemed really obvious to me. And I think, frankly, I was frustrated with my own behavior recently. And he starts and he's talking, and I go, "Hey, you open a feedback?" And you ask permission. You open a feedback, and he's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, if this was a business situation," and I started to describe the situation that he was frustrated about and didn't know how to make it work in terms of his business. And he goes, "Oh, that's easy. I would do ABC." And I said, "Okay, what does ABC look like in your home?" And like, ding, light bulb.
Yeah.
And then I thought, maybe that's how I get past these next roadblocks. I'll take business principles that I've spent years learning and implementing and that make sense to me, and I'm going to translate them to do better in my home. And it was around that time, Dan, I realized I wasn't a stellar communicator, but I am a stellar translator. And so I can translate things that are familiar to people into something that helps them take those next steps. And that was a catalyst for becoming a coach.
What a powerful story. And you said something just a few minutes ago about normalcy, right? What was normal in your world right before you walked into the room. I hope I don't know anyone. Mm-hmm. And then you characterized that, I think, very well by reflecting on the thought that they too might be feeling in that moment the exact same thing. So I want to say, there's been a big challenge in the mental health space. I can speak to it from the military in particular, people coming out of the military with different traumas. And normalizing mental health and finding a resource like you and your wife found that is going to help. It is and should be normalized. So I appreciate you pointing that piece out. I wanted to highlight it. But what a tremendous journey of hardship and insights along the way that all led to what coaching is really about. It's learning and then being able to share the insights from our experiences. And like you, I am a translator. I tend to help people take complex ideas and problem solve them and relay them in simple terms. Obviously, I do a lot much more. There we go.
Words.
I do. Yeah, exactly. I do a lot more than that, but that is certainly one of the pieces that I recognized, and other people helped me to recognize that I bring, is being able to take those complex ideas and terms and break them down simply. So, all right. So you've gone through these challenges. First of all, at that point, it sounds like that program was extremely beneficial for you in your relationship with your wife. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we were doing a lot of programs simultaneously. Hold Me Tight is an amazing program. I'm not an affiliate for that. Dan, we may need to become affiliates for a lot of these things we're throwing out there. But yeah, I essentially, in the last, for over a period of about 8 years, I invested close to 1,000 hours and over $100,000, actually well over 1,000 hours, closer to 1,500 hours and well over $100,000 in learning what I learned, both in business and in the psychological elements.
Yes. I mean, I find I haven't really done the numbers. so to speak, but I've certainly invested quite a lot over the last, well, if I were to count what the Army invested for me, it would be the same as if I had invested it for myself, except there's no monetary attachment for me personally. So I often don't think about adding that, but it's very true. They spent a lot of money investing in me, in my growth, and all of the things that led me to where I'm at today. But then personally invested, since 2012 in my own development and coaching experiences and trainings and education, many pieces that fit into the puzzle of what I'm able to bring to the table. So I can certainly relate to that. Now, I don't like to make assumptions. Sometimes I do that, of course, but with your coaching, I certainly believe I see a tie to why it is you have chosen to focus on families in the work you're doing, and that tie to business is definitely there. Is that a fair statement, though, to say that your own story is kind of what led you to the focus on the family piece?
Absolutely. Realizing we have these blind spots, right? There's someone phrased it once, and I don't know where I originally heard this, but we can't read the label from inside the bottle. And so having somebody there to help us. And the other thing is, I mean, think about what I first told my friend, $1,200. That's too expensive, right? Who's got 8 years and $100,000 to figure out a marriage or your family when your kids are moving into their teens and you've got very little time left to strengthen that relationship before they're finding it wherever else, and your wife's headed out the door like mine was? You don't have 8 years. Most people don't have $100,000, but I could do one thing at that time to start that journey and develop that journey. And if I can help people avoid that, then absolutely.
That's so great, Joe. I appreciate that. And I happen to know that you have a lot of other skills that go beyond the family piece and move into the business. You're a copywriting coach?
I can coach on copywriting. I did that a lot through Ray Edwards that you mentioned earlier. So I'm critiquing copy. Really anything to help somebody build a business. It doesn't matter what their business is, but the principles are the same. The principles, and they go both ways. I learned business first, almost at the expense of my family, and was able to translate business principles to helping my family, or to helping better understand what was required to grow and develop a healthy family. And then now I've realized that between those two things, if people will focus on the family aspects first, and that, let me clarify real quick. First doesn't mean I'm going to stop everything in my business. I'm going to stop producing content. I'm going to stop trying to set appointment. I'm going to stop getting clients. I'm going to stop having an opt-in page. I'm going to stop. That's not what that means. What that means is that you become very intentional with the time that you put into your family, and you become more intentional in the time you put into your business. It's ironic. People think I need to build my business first, and then they're willing to open up 7 days a week, every waking hour to building their business. But you don't actually, it wouldn't be any healthier to do that solely with your family. And so the idea here is that you're doing both, but you're doing it now. What people have been saying for so many years, Sam, I'm building this business for my family. I'm building this for the opportunities it would create for us. Mm-hmm. Well, we don't have to wait. You don't have to wait, I think, is the biggest thing. You can start living today. I was in a mastermind. Here's a quick story to illustrate this idea. I was in a mastermind, and one of the men had talked about how once he hit a certain financial milestone, he was going to go sponsor all of the meals for all of the children at a local elementary school. And the leader of this mastermind, Aaron Walker, great man, he says, well, that's fantastic. How many kids are you sponsoring right now? And the other individual says, oh, well, but I haven't reached that milestone. Like, that's what I want to do once I hit that milestone.
Right.
And Aaron says, well, sure, but that's milestone is for all the children. But you don't need to sponsor all the children right now. How many do you think you could sponsor right now? Maybe a single classroom, maybe a single kid. And so we get this idea that I have to hit a certain milestone. My business has to reach a certain point, and then I have more time for my family. But you can spare, if you become intentional with what you do in the morning, if you become intentional about every afternoon at a certain time, you have an appointment scheduled to call your spouse. You become intentional that every evening I stop at this time and I go do XYZ with my family, help with meals, play a game, read books, ask them how their day is going, sit in the same stinking room with them, whatever it happens to be. And now you're sponsoring, that's like sponsoring a lunch for a single kid. And then your business starts to grow. And now you have the flexibility, the opportunity to sponsor lunch for a classroom and then a grade level and then the entire school. And now your business is where it needs to be. And your family has been growing and developing along the way. And it all feels natural and perfect. And you're not waiting to circle back to what you said. I said circle back. I don't like saying circle back. That reminds me of political commentators. I apologize, everybody. To return to something that was said at the beginning of the call, talking about, oh shoot, now I forgot what I was going to say because of the circle back thing. But this idea that we haven't had to wait, that we've built simultaneously, that it's a holistic approach to being connected with my family. And because of that connection, which was constantly reinforced, I had the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical fortitude to pour into my business during those hours of intentionality and build my business at a greater rate than I ever would have done by just spending more time and working harder, faster, better, more on my business. I think that's what people miss when they think, oh, family first. No, it's you're sponsoring lunch for one kid at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. That I think is first of all, I think now I need to go find a rewind sound to use on these sound pads. That would have been perfect. I was like, oh, I don't have one. But no, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's a perfect segue to I know you're up to some things right now, and we've talked about it, but I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you're working on, what's coming up.
Yeah, so I have a membership that I do. It's the Family Builders membership. I know it's not the fanciest name, as I was talking with somebody else, but I know there's like warriors and Vikings and family strong, and I love all of that. But I'm not looking for a flash in the pan, and I don't think most people are. And so, really, truly building something, building a generational family, that's what I focus on. And that's what this membership is. It's a very reasonably priced monthly membership. So low cost entry opportunity to get in and learn these skills one at a time, building this foundation for your family. So I have that's available. And I also run masterclasses. We're really kind of diving in to help people better understand patterns of success, how you can translate, how you can focus on, if you focus on these patterns of success, then you can translate them to any area of your life that you choose, including multiples at the same time. So if people go check out forwardwithjoe.com/narrow, forwardwithjoe.com/narrow, then they can get access to some resources there, kind of plug into that. I'm on all social media channels at the Joe Pomeroy. There's loads of free content that people can do. And really just to start testing out one bite at a time, one student, one meal for our analogy at a time, to start making what they say is their priority as their actual priority.
Those are tremendous resources. You are a tremendous resource. We share a lot of great experiences and challenges, and I so appreciate you being willing, Joe, to dig in a little deeper today and share things that I know you don't always share in a public format. So I definitely appreciate all of that. You also do one-on-one coaching. Just to clarify, you offered the mastermind, not mastermind, your membership community and your master classes. But I want to make sure I point out that you are available for one-on-one coaching, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep. Absolutely.
You can find that at forwardwithjoe/narrow as well.
forwardwithjoe.com/narrow. Yep.
Perfect. Joe, I appreciate you again digging in and sharing so much with us today. Thank you for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I always enjoy our conversations, and I'm always impressed, Dan, with how you're able to inspire and bring out the best in people. And I think that shows up in your coaching, it shows up in your mastermind, and shows up in your podcast. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Joe. I will say you brought the mastermind up. If people want to know more about what that looks like, you can do one of two things. You can visit my website, danw.us, and click the button mastermind and read about it, as well as find the application. Or you can simply send me an email and I'll point you to the right direction or answer any questions you have. If you email dan@danw.us, I'd be happy to speak with you about any of those. And I will have all of the links for this show that we've talked about today in the notes. We've got Tony Robbins to talk about, some other programs to talk about, Ray Edwards. Man, I was making a list over here, Joe, and it was quite a bit. But I'll be sure to include those in the show notes. And if you found something in this conversation valuable, if you gained an insight today, or if you have a question, I'm going to encourage you to do one of two more things. One, if you'd share this with someone in your world, I would greatly appreciate that. That's helping people find out about this show. And the other thing is, you can leave me a question or comments if you visit podcast.danw.us. There's a little button on there. You can actually leave a voicemail. And if it's a question for Joe, I'd be happy to coordinate to see if we can't get that answered so that I can publish it on one of my upcoming episodes. And you can just simply leave me a note or send an email like I mentioned. I think that's it for today. So we will see you next time.